Special meeting to order. We are in competition with a buyout agenda item over at the LAUSD. But nevertheless, the information that we gather today will be incorporated into our document to develop a master plan to end poverty in Los Angeles. So we'll conduct the hearing as if there's 1 million people in the room, because eventually there will be 1 million people that read it, right, John? Okay. So with that, let me just make a general comment that today's hearing is on education and job training, and it almost seems unnecessary to say, but we nevertheless don't say it enough, that education is critical to the equation of equipping people in a manner that they are self-sufficient and not requiring assistance and slipping into issues of poverty during the course of their lifetime. In fact, I'm of a mind that we focus sometimes on skills training, but we don't focus on attitude training to overcome life's challenges. Some people are able to overcome them and some people aren't, but we all experience them at different levels. And so I'm thinking that as much as we know that perhaps a higher per capita investment in our students would have positive impact on reducing their experiences with poverty in the future, I'm also thinking that at some point we have to have a discussion about a cultural shift. So, for example, when we have raised the issue of education, we have focused considerable attention, given this economic crisis, on the issue of financial literacy. It's not just an issue of attitude, of course. It's a skills training, but it also is to securitize oneself so that they will make responsible decisions financially. And I think that creates an attitude. But having said that, I think that we always find ourselves in a position to maximize the minimum when it comes to public education. At the same time, we need to push for greater resources in education. It seems simple enough to use $700 billion to bail out banks when they screw up. It seems to me to be a more important investment to allocate an equivalent amount to protect our future in the educational field. Makes just about as much sense without debate, but I think after debate it makes a whole lot more sense. Also, the issue of job training. When we talk about bailing out the auto industry as one example, what can we do in our educational system to educate people adequately for the job, the specific jobs that are available in particular industries, such as the auto industry? And if we're bailing out the auto companies, wouldn't we be providing some assistance by educating people as to their opportunities? If they are going to reduce their workforce, should we be transitioning folks toward other, or I should say, are we going to have to convert our job base so that we can move people from one industry to another with more ease? In any case, there's a lot of questions with regard to education. We're not going to be able to answer all the issues related to education as it might impact poverty. I think our key effort with regard to the master plan to end poverty in Los Angeles is to create some notions of thinking that might incubate and eventually develop into a real substantive agenda for not only Los Angeles but beyond. So with that, let me start calling up the witnesses, and I apologize for being a little bit late. Our first two presenters represent sort of outside organizations that impact on public education, and we've seen a growing interest in community participation in the educational system. I remember when I was parent advisory president at my daughter's elementary school. This is quite a few years ago. My daughter's graduating from law school next year, so this was quite a long time ago. I had a tough time getting into my daughter's classroom just to observe, and I was a teacher, so the principal, in fact, I don't even think I ever got in. They had a real tough time allowing a parent to just sit in and observe. And today, that's almost unheard of. If that occurs, it's almost cause for legal action. But so we are very pleased to have two people who I think are key to engaging the community in their role in the educational process. I was trained in the Operation Chicano Teacher program at Cal State Northridge, and I'll never forget that, given that we were focused on, this was during the whole transition of Latinos becoming a majority of the Los Angeles Unified School District population, and I remember one of my teachers, a Latino teacher in the educational department at Cal State Northridge, saying that the Mexican culture is such that, and perhaps the Latino culture in general, is such that parents separate themselves from the school because they believe that it's the school's responsibility to educate, and that when there's a concept in the Spanish language that is when you talk about a child who is mal educado, un niño mal educado, literally translated poorly educated, but literally meaning bad manners. That means that the child was not educated well at home. So the parent's responsibility is to teach their kids good manners at home, and if the parent has to engage at school, it's usually involving a belt or other device that might discipline a child into more appropriate action. So sometimes new arrivals have a real tough time with just going to talk to the teacher and visiting the school. They think that there must be something wrong if they have to go to the school. I think that a lot of that has changed because of the incredible media that we have in the Spanish language in Los Angeles in particular, where all the top news shows and radio shows and TV shows are in Spanish, and so I think that there's been a saturation of information that is moving people quicker into what's the word? Assimilation than particularly with regard to schools. And also there's just a sheer dominance of Latinos in the schools. I think something greater than 70% or more. Usually in most schools it's greater than 90%. So that alone has accounted for the community to become a little more engaged in the educational process. So with that, let me invite Elvia de la Torre, Associate Director of Community Programs for the Urban Educational Partnership, and Anthony Ortiz Luis, Educational Coordinator for the Alliance for a Better Community.
Thank you, Council Member. Thank you for having us here today. And
thank you, Elvia de la Torre.
I guess in your question for ending poverty and how does education kind of tie into that, let me give you a little background on the work that we've been doing at the San Fernando Valley. My area that I've been assigned to is predominantly working in San Fernando Valley. And the group that we have is the Valley Education Collaborative. And the Valley Education Collaborative is a coalition of civic, private, public, education, parent, community organizations that come together to work towards policy educational issues in the San Fernando Valley and work towards student achievement, specifically increasing the graduation rate and also getting our students to be college and career ready. And so I think in working with the school sites that we do have now, one example is Silmar High School is we've done a lot in terms of developing partnerships. And I've been working with the school system, secondary schools, middle schools, and high schools for almost 9 years now. And one of the difficulties that schools always have is developing those partnerships in the community, either being at community-based organizations, business, career, or even higher institutions. You would think like 4 universities or 2 universities. And so I think what we need to do as a city is consider how do we develop those relationships and how do we support the school sites in developing those relationships so we can have career and college ready students and developing multiple options in being able to support themselves financially. So for example, if I have a student that is about getting, is in the 9th grade in high school, it's not just we're pushing that student to say, go to college, 4-year university, and that's the only option that you should be. That's the ultimate goal. I think that is the ultimate goal, but I think what we need to do is make them college and career ready. So instead of just one door that they can walk out of after high school, we should have 4 doors. We should have a door for 4-year university, a door that they can go into that's a 2-year university, be it Mission, Valley, or Pierce College, or they can go to a trade school or straight to the workplace. So I think we have to have those multiple opportunities and options for those students. And I think what you're right, they need to have that attitude shift. And one survey that was done by the Economic Alliance a couple years ago was they surveyed all the middle HR managers and from Glendale all the way to Calabasas. And they asked them, what are the things that you found that are missing in your entry-level employees? And what that came out of that survey was within entry-level employees that are young people, what they found was they were missing 3 characteristics, 3 traits. One of them was communication. And communication in terms of written and verbal skills. And one key thing that was very interesting about that was they found that young men or young male employees, they were better at verbal communication. However, they had a hard time in written communication. And then you flip that over with women, they found them to be better written communication, but poorly on verbal communication. And so I think we need to consider that not just at the LA Unified or education system, but in general as a whole. How do we translate that we encourage that not just in the school system, but in our communities? The second thing they found was ethical values. They were finding that a lot of our entry-level employees were having lapses in judgment, If I come in late to work, do I need to let my supervisor know? Okay, I found this. I'm missing a little bit of cash in the drawer. Do I report that, or do I just put my money in to make sure I don't get written up by being short on money? So they were finding the ethical values wise, our young people were having a hard time. And then finally was the ability to work in a team. How do I work with other individuals of different cultures or different backgrounds and be able to work as a team and accomplish the goal that we have? And so those are some of the things that we've found out that we've seen in working with the schools that we worked at, is that we need to really reinforce with our young people first, have multiple options, multiple ways they need to go to. So it's and number 2, they need to be college and career ready. Not just college, but not just career also. And then finally, we need to focus on those 3 things. I think ethical values, ability to work in a team, and communication. And that kind of ties back all the way to the primary level. Why is reading so important? Because reading leads to writing. And if you're a good reader, you're a good writer. And then in your writing, then you're able to express your thoughts and ideas. And it goes hand in hand. And that's why we need to reinforce reading, not just in the primary years, but I think we don't do a good enough job doing that in the middle school years, and especially in the high school years. So I think in that aspect, that's one of the things that we can share working out in the San Fernando Valley.
Another thing is bringing the necessary collaborative partners, the necessary stakeholders into the schools, having the community take partnership or ownership of those needs. So bringing, of course, important bringing the parents, but also what are the community organizations around the school that could come in and really form a good collaborative partnership, a good collaborative team to meet the needs of those students. For example, with Urban Education Partnership, at this time, we are working at San Fernando High School, and we do have a coordination team where it involves teachers, the principal, parents, collaborative organizations that are listening to the needs of the parents and the students, and also assessing what the school has, the resources, and bringing in those resources as well. So what is not working, what is working, and if it's not working, then bring in something else, another partnership that is working, and making the parents, involve the parents. The promotora model, that's a great thing of educating the parents on the educational system, how to navigate the system, but also how to talk to their other parents and bringing them in to find out the importance of being part of this collaboration, this partnership with the school, with the community.
Your presentation is sort of a generic presentation about how to improve the educational system in general. Describe the nexus to the issue of poverty, if you could. In the context of poverty, are your programs focused on issues of poverty? Mm-hmm. Okay, so describe that.
For example, we have in Pacoima Community Charter School, there is a Pacoima Community Initiative. So there, the issues are driven by the community, are driven by the parents. So we're bringing in collaborative partners from the city, social workers, bringing in people that are working with children who are affected by gang-related issues. We are working with the Parks and Recreation. So I know one of the issues at Pacoima with that particular community was that they didn't feel they had that relationship with the police officers. So there was a day where they came in. It was a Saturday, and police officials and the community did integrate and talk and try to see, what was the problem? Why didn't you feel safe talking to us? Or why did the police department not feel comfortable talking to the community? So, and those were issues that the community brought up, that they wanted to try to start developing a communication with police officers, with the police department. And so it was driven by the community. Well, what we did is that the initiative just bring in the necessary resources.
I guess the best way for me to put this into context is I work with a young man, and he comes from an immigrant family. And when I first met him, he told me, Anthony, I really want to go to USC. And he was mentioning to me that that's the dream college that I want to go to, and it's something that I strive for. And lately, he's telling me, you know what, Anthony, I'm having a problem. I don't know if I could go to USC anymore because my mom needs me to go to work at McDonald's. And the discussion that I was trying to have with him was that I think I can't tell you what to do, first of all. I'm not in your situation. You're the only one that can determine that. But we know that a person that graduates from high school makes on average about $18,000 to $19,000 a year, plus or minus a couple thousand. And then a person that graduates from college, they're making about $38,000 to $40,000, and so on and so forth. And so the discussion I was trying to have with him is, why don't you talk to your mom this way? And his mom really wants him to work because he's the oldest out of 3 siblings. And the conversation that he was having was that I need to work, and I don't know if I can go to college anymore because my mom needs me to go to work when I turn 16. I need to get a work permit. And so I was trying to convince him that, you know what, I don't know what the answer is, but maybe you can do what I did. I worked full-time while I was going to college, but at the same time I was striving to also go to school. And that's something that a lot of kids sometimes don't realize, that it's either option 1 or option 2. Either go to work or go to school and college. And they fail to neglect that there's an option 3. You can go work and go to school. I know it's difficult, but it's something that can be done. And you have to get across to your mother or father that that's how you get out of poverty. is getting a college education or getting a specific trade or in getting a skill, becoming an electrician, becoming an auto mechanic, and make $60,000 to $70,000 a year. And so that's what I try to do is, in terms of being an auto mechanic, I had another young person said, Anthony, I want to become auto mechanic. And I tuned him on, I connected him to one of my friends that I graduated with, and he's an auto mechanic for Jaguar now. And he's making $80,000 to $90,000 a year. He went to go to school for trade in Arizona, went there for 2 years, came back here, and now is working for Jaguar. So I think in terms of poverty, we need to really get across to our young people that it's not just for university that you need to go to get out of poverty and get your family out of poverty, but there's also other options. And I think we don't emphasize the other options enough, that it's always about if you don't go to college, then that's it. And then when a kid feels like he's not college material, then he's a failure. And I don't think that's we're doing a good enough job to emphasize the other options. And it's either one or the other. And if you don't go to college, then you're a failure. That's not the case, because not everyone can be a doctor, not everyone can be a lawyer. I think everyone needs to get that option. I think that's the ultimate goal, but we need to let our young people know that there's other options to get their families and themselves out of poverty.
And it's educating the parents, making the parents, informing the parents of the different options. It's not only the students, but also the parents as well.
Ed, why don't you join us up here? There's only three of you, so we'll just have a conversation, if you will. Okay, and then we have one other speaker. I'll bring him up too, from the Community College District. I should introduce Ed Morris, Deputy Superintendent for Adult and Career Education. Thank you for being here. You probably feel relieved to be here as opposed to other places you might be at this particular time.
The opportunity to get out of the office.
The rumor mill must be going crazy over there, but as you know, those things pass, and then we have our real jobs to do.
Stay focused.
But the reason I asked you to step forward is because Anthony is talking about multiple pathways to not just multiple pathways for the individual, but multiple pathways for the system to provide, so that different people with different interests can move sort of flexibly within these various pathways to find where they might have the greatest success. And I keep, representing the 7th Council District, and certainly recognizing that that there are many successful people who emerged out of my district and from other areas where there's higher levels of poverty, and individually have become extremely successful and probably didn't even finish high school. And yet other people who are college educated, maybe have 2 college degrees, and are struggling right now. And I think you hit on a key word, and that or term, and that is the definition of success. And how do we define success? And I think you're absolutely correct that while there is a general understanding that people who go to college, for example, they make $1 million more in their lifetime. That's an old thing. It's probably a little bit less today, but the idea is that if you go to college, you'll make more money in your lifetime. But it ain't necessarily true. Anecdotally, we know, probably each of us know dozens of people who are extremely successful financially without going to school, and I would argue they're greater successes than people who had it handed to them on a silver platter. But how do you capture that motivation, that spirit, that desire for improvement, and how do you instill that in others who do not have it? So that's one challenge that we have, because when we look at long-term issues of poverty, we find more people who have not embraced the notion of what true success means for them. At least that's my observational finding. When you find I lost my train of thought there. But my point is that there are different ways to achieve success, different definitions for success, and I am finding more and more young people, particularly young men, who struggle with the notion. And I don't know, it may even have something to do with the women increasing in terms of their numbers in the workplace and their prominence in the workplace, and I think it's actually having a psychological effect on many men. They can't handle it, but maybe we didn't effectually transition them to a better place to understand that notion. So on one side of this equation, we're talking about attitudes, understandings of success, definition of what was the word you used? Ethics.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, we have pragmatics, more or less kind of the stuff you deal with, particularly more and more. This is basic stuff, reading, writing, arithmetic kind of stuff. Now, some of the issues that we can't change the world, certainly not from the city of Los Angeles. And I should explain that this document, the Master Plan to End Poverty document, is not written for the city of Los Angeles per se. It is going to encompass any ideas we have that we think might contribute to reducing poverty. So, for example, we are woefully lacking in our educational system on training for financial literacy. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any requirement to teach people how to get credit, how to fill out a checkbook. And we've heard anecdotal stories about this. I've known of some teachers who might have a stock portfolio who educate their kids on stocks, like a math teacher will have them purchase stocks as an experiment. But it's anecdotal, it's experimental, and it's not, there is no systemic approach to financial literacy training. Conversely, we also know that many immigrant parents use their kids to translate for them while traversing through legal documents, real estate transactions, purchasing a car, hospital issues, medical issues, and yet our kids are not getting financial training. They're not getting or financial literacy training, and they certainly aren't reading at the legal level. So somewhere there's got to be. We need to simplify some of these legal documents is one thing, but we also need to try to educate all our kids about financial literacy. Our kids, and I think the economic situation we're in is largely resulting from the fact that we do not have good financial literacy training in our country, not just in LAUSD, but in our country as a whole. We simply don't have consistent requirements for financial literacy training at every level. As much as we teach history, 3 different times? Is it 3 times?
Well, we teach world history, 1 and 2, United States history, 1 and 2, and United States government, so it's 5 times.
Like at the 4th grade level?
4th grade level, 7th and 8th grade
7th
level,
and
then
11th.
in high school.
Okay, so 3 times in their 12-year process, we are teaching them the same history, U.S. history basically, right? And I know there are other requirements, but U.S. history basically. But not once do we teach them financial literacy. And it seems to me that at every level they have financial literacy needs. At the 4th grade level, at the 7th grade level, and at the 11th grade level, it would seem to me that they need to understand financial transactions at those various points. Another issue, just a simple one, why do we not teach kids in this world of computers, why do we not teach typing until middle school? Why don't we teach it in like the 3rd grade? Because all the kids are using computers before they get into school. My daughter, 10 months old, I kid you not, 10 months old, just fascinated playing with my BlackBerry. And I but she already knows how to move the ball on the BlackBerry, that it changes the screen. She knows that the video is going to show her face on it, and she gets a big kick out of that. But I'm just saying that we are not teaching the technical skills to our kids to be able to embrace this the new informational technologies. And that's just one example, the typing skills. And of course, we have a million anecdotes. I think ultimately it boils down to per capita spending. We're just not getting the resources. And then to sort of shift gears to direct them towards Ed Morris, career education. Our economy and our workforce needs are constantly changing, and it always seems that we have the technology and resources at the public school system that is 20 years or sometimes 30 years behind what is necessary to get somebody prepared for the workforce. We've moved a lot of training into the private sector. And individuals are paying for their own education. Historically, we took that on as a social burden. We feel whatever we can train somebody to do is good for all of us. If they're doing well, we'll all do well. But more and more, the individual is bearing that responsibility. And also, we can't keep up with the private schools in terms of the workforce training. So for our adult and career education to be effective, it seems to me we either have to define ourselves as a basic training institute for those that didn't get through the regular 12-year program successfully, to learn English, to learn basic math, and to maybe have some basic science programs, or we need to have a massive investment in the technological resources to get our people prepared for the future without having to bear the burden of going to private school. I don't think we're anywhere near that decision. I think we're slipping. We claim we do, but in reality, it seems like we're being forced into the first proposition more and more, where all we do is basic training. Mm-hmm. Anyway, if you could react to some of that. Again, I want us to focus on the whole notion of
sure, if you'll
poverty.
If you'll bear with me, let me give you a couple of headlines.
You bared with me, I'm going to bear with you.
Let me give you a couple of headlines. This workforce, that is the current workforce between the ages of 24 and 35 years old, is the first workforce in the history of the United States that has less education than its parents. The upcoming workforce, those between the ages of 18 and 24 and those currently in our secondary schools, are predicted to be in worse condition educationally than the current workforce. This is the first workforce in American history to have less education than their parents.
I'll give you one. The average vocabulary 20 years ago for a 12th high school graduate, 50,000. Today, 30,000.
Without a doubt.
So when you talked about communication,
there are between 80 and 90 million workers in the United States in the workforce, currently working, who are not earning a family-sustaining wage. They're poor, although they're working, and they're working 40-hour jobs. Between 80 and 90 million adult Americans in the workforce not earning a family-sustaining wage. Within Los Angeles Unified School District, 76.4% of the students qualify for free or reduced lunch. That means that they are disadvantaged economically. Most could be described as living in poverty. Those children cannot get themselves out of poverty. They're children. The kindergartners who just started in September, 3 months ago, will live in poverty every day of every week of every school year until they graduate, unless we do something to educate their parents. These kids can't get themselves out of poverty. Patrick Kennedy, Democrat, Rhode Island, is about to introduce legislation that would take the training funding from $2 billion nationwide up to approximately $20 billion. That's going to take a lot of support locally. It's going to take a lot of support nationally. But if we don't do something for those antiquated classrooms, for that antiquated equipment, we're just not going to solve this problem. We are going to stay, as you described, in exactly the same place, doing very basic skills that can't be marketed in the workplace. Not only do we have that as an ongoing environment, we are now seeing, especially in the San Fernando Valley, new poverty. We're seeing countrywide mortgage people a little further out. We're seeing real estate agents. We're seeing car salesmen, people who were kind of in a service sector, now coming back to our occupational centers to learn to be medical billing clerks so that they can work in doctor's offices and they can do basic bookkeeping, skills that they can actually get a $10 an hour job for. All of those soft skills folks are coming back to school. And this is kind of on the edge of new poverty. We have a real inherent system that we need to correct, but now we have more being piled on top of it. And this is being piled on top of the existing system at the same time that we have a budget crisis. And when these people find themselves in a personal financial crisis, they don't care about global crisis. They don't care about global warming. They care about, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to put food on the kids' table? How am I going to get myself to work? Where's the bus fare coming from? Real personal issues, one by one. And people that we talk about, the target population, people who are living in poverty in the city of Los Angeles, they need education. But they have multiple barriers. They need child care. Mm-hmm. They need transportation. Mm-hmm. They need health care. All of these things that keep them from being successful. Mm-hmm. They come to our schools, they enter programs, but suddenly a child gets sick. They've got to miss a day of school. They've got to miss 3 days of school. They've got to miss a week of school. And the class moves on without them. Same thing when the gas prices went up to $4 a gallon and beyond. People were making a choice between feeding their kids and going to school. The training that we do, the education that we give to these parents needs to be high quality, low cost, and above all, accessible. They have to be able to get there, and they have to be able to get there on their schedule. And it has to be short term. The shorter the term of the education, the more likely the person is going to be able to tough it out and get through 6 weeks, 8 weeks, become a medical biller, and get back into the workforce. And then, as these guys were saying, begin to work themselves up once they have a steady income again. There are some interesting things going on around the country. Solar panels, insulation. People are being trained, people who are living in poverty are being trained to install solar panels. They're being trained to do insulation, internal houses. They're being trained to install double pane windows. What does this do? It insulates homes. It gets them off the power grid. These people are being trained to do their own homes, do their neighbors' homes, get the whole city off the power grid. and begin to put electricity back into the system rather than take it out. If you can't get a person a decent living wage, at least you can, one, train them to do a job, and two, reduce their bills by perhaps integrating some community redevelopment, because that is community redevelopment. It's kind of the Jimmy Carter model. Let's put some solar systems on top of houses in poverty areas, get people off the grid, reduce their bills, get them trained so that they can work out in the neighborhood. One of the other things that we run into is what you guys were talking about, soft skills, non-cognitive skills, the ability for somebody to get to work the next day, to get to work the next day, to be there, to stay there, to do the job. They need the hard skills, but they also need those soft skills. And what we're finding is that employers are kind of reluctant to hire people who've been through a training program, JTPA, CalWorks, any of these programs, because they look at the applicant and they say, this is a person who has all of those challenges, the child care challenge, the health care challenge, the transportation challenge. So the individual becomes stigmatized simply by being successful in a program versus just having been successful going through high school or going through high school and community college. And that's one of the things that we really need to deal with. I reviewed the report, and many of the issues in the report have been overtaken by AB 2448, Lonnie Hancock, which pretty much prescribes how career and technical education should work in the school system. And that is, we can no longer give a kid a saw and send them to a wood shop. We have to do a sequence of 3 courses, a beginning, a middle, and end course. It has to lead to a job certificate, and that certificate and the course cannot be certified by the school district. It has to be certified by what's called an employer advisory board. This is now statute. So we have to go out into the community and we have to say, I'm training Ed to do solar installations, and I've got to find companies who say, we'll hire Ed if you train him and this is the course. Mm-hmm. 7 out of 10 of the highest paying jobs and fastest growing jobs in the Los Angeles area are related to healthcare occupations. We can't get healthcare workers to man the system, much less to come into the schools to teach the people that we need to get into the system. And one of the reasons there is because of the pay. Any healthcare worker can make more outside than they can working for the school district. So it becomes a downward spiral. What we can't afford is to have a healthcare worker shortage if an earthquake hits, if something man-made happens. That's going to be a serious issue. We have a healthcare worker shortage now, and everybody is talking about universal health care. You can't get in to see a doctor. Imagine if there were universal health care. There should be. I'm not saying there shouldn't be. But why don't we connect the people who need jobs with the education to get them into the healthcare system? That is, as workers. LVNs, RNs, nursing assistants, pharmaceutical techs. Somehow we need to come up with money that is focused specifically on a target like that. Okay. Additionally, it would be helpful if we could build small training centers along transportation corridors, at the stops along the blue line, the red line, the gold line. because that's how the target population moves. And we could work out reduced price fares or badges or something so that students could get to the training. That's a way that the city could work together with the school district. We could put some small schools. I don't even call them schools, small training centers. If we could do a small nursing center at Avenue 58 on that parking lot. And the other thing is to have them always continuously running so that if a mother has to drop out, as I described earlier, she can come back to a class which is right behind the class she was in. Rather than having one nursing class in one location and another location having another nursing class. We do everything at one site in cycles so that somebody who drops out due to real life can come back and catch up in the cycle. And at those sites, we also have to do the basic literacy, the basic math that enables those people to move forward through healthcare occupations.
Okay, now I'm going to. Education and healthcare are two of the largest issues when looking at the issue of poverty. But they're so large that you just can't possibly cover everything in a document like we're going to prepare with the resources that we have. With regard to education, it seems to me that while we can have some anecdotal ideas, some of the suggestions, for example, you had, like the solar training. For the most part, our document is going to focus on some principles. So, for example, the principle of spending more per capita dollars and the generic effect that has, and the fact that most of those dollars have to come from the federal government. Mm-hmm. So our document could talk about the issue of the per capita spending and how Los Angeles ranks amongst the worst in the nation in per capita spending, and how we need to develop a legislative package to increase the per capita spending that focuses on the federal government.
Along those lines, if I may interrupt, there are 74 regional occupational center programs around the state of California. Some of them are joint powers run by small school districts. Some are single school district regional occupational centers and programs. And some are just independent. Of the 74, every one has a different apportionment rate. That means that if a student goes to school every day, all year, they get one apportionment. In Kern County, that apportionment is $5,600 per student. LA, of the 74, is at the absolute bottom with $3,600. Same class, same costs, and we get $2,000 less per student. That's why we have antiquated equipment.
The bottom line, I mean, it still falls under the category of increasing the per capita spending. In Los Angeles, if apportionment is the issue, that's the issue. But the point is, we've got to increase our per capita spending to be competitive in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. Another principle that I'm formulating from these presentations is the need to invest more resources and research in an understanding of the workforce and what jobs are. I can say that Mayor Villaraigosa has invested a significant amount of time. It's not very sexy work. A lot of people don't know about it, but he's put a lot of effort in his team figuring out where the jobs are going to be. Mm-hmm. And so where are the streams of training resources that we need to create to be able to meet those needs. So we know, for example, one is logistics, another is healthcare, particularly nursing, So we need to do a much better job of understanding where the future jobs are going to be in the United States, where we will be competitive in the future, and therefore where we should place our resources in specifying the kinds of jobs we should be focusing. Sometimes we want general skills. I mean, I don't know too many people in the 12th grade who know exactly what they want to be. I mean, there's, or at least they think they, even if they think they know, they end up being something else for the most part. I see a lot of heads nodding, so I take it that's your experience as much as it's mine. I certainly never expected to be a politician. But the point is that we know we need nurses, 30,000 of them a year, and we're giving 30,000 visas to people from outside the country, and that's all well and good to meet the need, but it doesn't. We should be getting a dual benefit, and this is another principle, and that is that we shouldn't look at our educational resources in a vacuum. We should look at our educational resources as part and parcel of our economic. For example, if we're looking at the federal government, we shouldn't just be looking at education from the Education Department's perspective. We should be looking at it from the Commerce Department's perspective, and how we can use resources for education to benefit our economy. One specific issue that actually cuts through three federal departments is healthcare. If we can expand the services for healthcare, then we obviously are creating great job opportunities and theoretically creating economic opportunity for business. And so we should be working not just to provide services to people for healthcare, but to create economic opportunity for the United States. And so the principle is to not be so self-contained when we're looking at educational resources. We have to recognize that creating education in healthcare should provide economic resources for the business community and boost our economy. So those are the kinds of principles that we will incorporate. Another principle that you talk about is ensuring that the community is engaged in their school. I reflect again on the old saying, I've said it many times, about Thomas Jefferson saying no child should go to school more than 5 miles from their home. And he said this before there was a public educational system, but I believe what he was speaking of. Now, I don't know, I'm interpreting it my own way, but this is the man who wrote the Declaration of Independence and who defined poverty for our nation. And I believe what he was talking about was democracy, that no child should go to school 5 miles from their home because they need to have an identity. They need to have a foundation. They need to feel confidence within their own community in order to appreciate everybody else's. And that diversity, that respect for diversity that should emerge from that is what makes democracy strong. So the fact that you're out there organizing communities to get involved in their school is, I believe, exactly what Thomas Jefferson meant, that our schools are not just technical institutions, they are communities. And the extent to which our schools are functioning as a community, our community will do better. So I think the issue of community collaboration with the local schools, at every level actually, is critical to impacting the opportunities, particularly in poor communities where there is a larger segment of the population that does not get involved in their school. I've taught in a few different schools, and I can tell you that the schools that were in the nicer areas had more parent participation. But one thing we ought to look at is, when I taught in the Catholic school, the parents showed up. I mean, if they didn't show up, they had to pay more tuition or something, or they had to do more hours of service on the playground, and so they showed up. And so maybe we need to require parents to show up more. And if they don't show up, they have to go work on the playground, or they have to go control traffic in the morning, or they have to do something. But that would be an anecdote versus a principle. In terms of principles, we need to develop principles that will drive our agenda at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local level. So these are some of the things that I've captured from the notions you're saying.
If I could say,
By the way, would you support legislation to require financial literacy training in our schools?
I think it's necessary, because I know known that children from rich families, they're taught from a young age the importance of financial literacy, the importance of stock exchange trading, because that's what, and wouldn't it be nice for us
Well,
to
we could argue about
Yeah.
whether knowing so much about stocks is
Yeah,
important.
but financial
I'm not
literacy.
even talking about. I'm not
Yeah.
even talking about stocks.
Yeah.
But I agree with you.
Yeah.
They speak
start
about,
at a young
around the
age.
dinner table. They're talking about this
Exactly.
stuff. But I'm just talking about how to do a checkbook, how
Yeah.
to manage a bank account, how to what a loan, what the difference in interest is. If you borrow $100,000 at 5%, what the difference is between borrowing at 6%, how much out of your income over time that takes. Those are some of the things, and honestly, I used to teach that stuff but I taught in a job training program for young women, and I used to teach all of those things. Budgeting, how do you? A lot of kids think, well, you know what? I'm not going to give up on my. It could even be something their hobby. I used to tell the girls, look, you want to have you want to go to a party once a week? I don't have a problem with that, but know how much it's going to cost you. Factor in the cost for makeup, the cost for the new dress, the cost for factor that into your budget so that you don't lose sight of the baby food that you have to buy for your child, or some other or not be able to calculate how much you need to save for emergencies if your baby gets ill. So those are the simple. The financial responsibilities. What are the things that caused the economic crisis? Not from the perspective of the financial institutions, and particularly those that ripped off, but from the perspective of the individual, how to shield themselves from those kinds of takings. And I believe that the fundamentals in our society are you should know how to do a loan. I don't think they teach you the various issues and concerns about getting a loan. It's almost like it's assumed. Well, you're already taking a loan when you're 17 years old, going to college. Yeah. If you go to college, and even college students walk out of college in more debt than they had any idea, and what that meant. When they're out of college, and even if they only go for a year, they're strapped with $10,000 of debt if they go to a reasonable school, or a moderate school, I should say. So, but getting a loan, managing a bank account, and not just getting a loan, but purchasing a car, purchasing a house, the differences between basic information that we expect people in our society to know. I believe that the best, one of the most glaring statistics in Los Angeles that's an indication of poverty is that we have become a society where the people who own their own homes, the families that live in homes that they own, are only 31% of us. The rest of us are renting. 69% of our population are renting. And of the 31%, how many of them actually own the home? And that was before the foreclosure crisis. It's probably much higher now. But the point being, the critical element in issues of poverty, because the fact of the matter is most people experience poverty for a temporary period of time. They have an experience that causes them to slip into poverty, and then they have to recover from it. So the average time is about 2.5 years. But the home represents an asset that gets them through those trying times because it provides collateral for them to be able to get the loan. Again, financial literacy. So on the one hand, do the people in the schools that you represent even want to own a home? Do they actually think that owning a home is one of their priorities in life? I'm not sure. As I go around, I talk to people, and they may say it, oh, I want to own a home like Shaq or something silly, but have they really incorporated as a value that one of the ways to success in life is to own a home? And that home is going to be your safety net for so many other trying times. But if you get yourself into a situation like 1,000 people a month in the San Fernando Valley over the last several years, losing their homes, then you don't have that safety net, obviously.
And I don't think that conversation is taking place, Councilman. I don't, in terms of, like you said, writing checks, learning how to balance a budget, it is taught, but it's more of a pass-through. It's taught in life skills, 9th grade, but it's a 1-week course that a teacher will kind of just skim through. And after that, then that's it.
Is it a required?
Life skills, yes, it is a required course for 9th graders.
But is the financial literacy portion of life
There is
skills,
no
is it required?
No, I don't
So
think it
life
is.
skills could mean a lot of things to a lot of different. I think we need to explore that more, and we actually intended the other school district officials to get a little more into it. I do want to focus on life skills as a specific target. I mean, I'm sorry, financial literacy skills as a specific target, because I really think that's something we can do in the short term, and particularly given the impetus of the financial crisis we're experiencing, people are highly sensitive to it. We might be able to get movement. I was a state legislator for more than 8 years, and I can tell you, changing the state curriculum is one of the most difficult challenges in the state. So when you're taking minutes from this pool and moving them into that pool, you get it just creates this incredible bureaucracy of lobbying efforts. But if we can do it in a way that the minutes count for math, or the minutes count for something else, it reduces the need to move the minutes of the day. Ed knows what I'm talking about specifically, but it is. I think that financial literacy would go a long way to stave off some of the poverty that we're seeing. Just by individual knowledge, could stave off their own their own issues with finances and poverty. The other issue that I wanted to get to is the need for more technical resources. It sort of falls into the category of, and what we have to do with the principle on per capita spending, we have to sort of break down what kinds of things you can do if we increase the per capita spending. One of them would be we could reinvest in technology, which is a constant need. It's really interesting that Patrick Kennedy has introduced this bill, because it's so Kennedy-esque to engage us in education, because that's exactly that was at the foundation of Kennedy's whole effort to get us to the moon. That's what he was. It wasn't so much about landing on the moon as much as educating our people to drive our economy. I don't even know. I was going to say doubling, tripling. I don't even know what 10 times is, but to multiply that investment by 10 times on a national scale would have a tremendous impact. So that's something that we should maybe even refer to, not necessarily to support or oppose, but to say that this is exactly the kind of debate that has to be had in today's world. Other principles. Are there other principles that you can offer that we should incorporate? As I said, we're not going to be able to get into the details of the hundreds and hundreds. Each year in Sacramento, we would have hundreds and hundreds of bills just in education. But in terms of the global issue, the underlying causes of poverty, what are some of the principles we might want to add to our document?
I think one of the things would be high expectation from.
Okay, that was one that was mentioned, and so we're talking about creating an attitude of success, and How you do that, I don't know. We would appreciate your input on creating a more. Some people just have it. In fact, the vast majority of people have an attitude of success.
But how will you do? How will you take to try to change within the school, that particular school within that community? Because it just depends on what community you're at. You know, there's schools that have high expectation, that they expect their students to be successful, that they're bringing in resources, curriculums, things that are high expectation, that that you as a student have high expectations of yourself, that the teachers have expectation of the students, that the community. So yes, you know, that's a question I think everybody, like, there's certain communities that do have a high expectation for their children, but what about it's not known sometimes to the low-income communities about the high expectations. So to change that mentality of, you know what, yes, you know, my child is going to be, you know, my child requires this high rigorous course, and you're going to be able to succeed in that rigorous course. And, you know, I as a teacher, I'm going to help you. I as the principal, I'm going to help you. So I think that's, you know, how can we change that attitude?
The thought that comes to my mind when you say that, when I used to teach at San Fernando Middle School, and I was in a room that was on a 2-story building, looking over the play yard during break period, and when I would watch the kids in the play yard, you know, half of them were practicing kickboxing. When I think about the conversations that my daughter's friends would have, they attended the Gifted Magnet. They'd be talking about college. So, you know, how do we get kids to talk about things that are more success oriented is a critical issue. We don't do those things. We just let them have their rest period, go out there. But recreation for one group is kickboxing, and recreation for another group is talking about where they're going to college.
What we try to do is we try to give our students, when we're talking again about this particular population, and in many cases they've already failed in school many, many, many times. So we tried to give them small successes and build on those small successes until they begin to feel like, I can do this.
And I think what's the concept in reading? Not burnout, but what do you call it when you reach your
Your
going back
proficiency level. Yeah,
no,
going.
where there's a regression when you hit it's a burnout point essentially when you
hit a plateau.
No, I can't remember the term, but the point is that I believe by challenging poor kids to go to college, that we burn a lot of them out because they simply don't have. It's not a reality to them because we haven't created the incremental successes to make it a reality for them. So if you talk about going to college and they have no clue how to get there, then they just turn off to that because they don't see it as a reality. But if you educate them to the incremental ways to get there, you know, they have a shot. And that's one of the reasons when we wrote the legislation relative to the A through G requirement, and in fact I helped write the LAUSD's, the WESAR policy on A through G to include the provision to allow for other pathways. Because at first it was going to be a 100% requirement that everybody have A through G requirements. And I said, wait a minute, what if you're going to the military? What if your parents own a business? What if you want to be a bricklayer? I mean, do you need to have the A through G requirements? And while you might benefit from it, you might not need to have that. So we need to. That was a good. What did he say? What you called it? Baby steps. What did you call it?
No, just small successes that
small successes.
Yes, that begin to.
I like that. Let's
build on each other. And if I may interject,
Ed, maybe you can write the section on small successes.
I'd be happy to do it or have staff work on it with you. I'd be happy to have staff work on any of this with you. I think we also need to.
Because your population is primarily poor.
Yes.
And so
we don't have doctors in
to
school.
talk about incremental successes, we can do that. Marvin, why don't you just have a seat with us?
if I may, I think we also need, when you talked about maleducado and the parents not entirely engaging, I think we need to somehow engage the parents in them having high expectations of their schools. Not just getting involved in the schools. They need to have high expectations of the schools. Not just having access. You spoke of not being able to have access to your daughter's classroom at one point. But not only do teachers need to have high expectations of their students, but students need to have high expectations of their teachers. And parents need to have high expectations of their schools. And even non-parents, taxpayers need to have high expectations of their schools. And high expectations needs to be a general community attitude.
You know what, let me add to that, Ed. I think how do you have high expectations? And I think what you need with high expectation that goes hand in hand is data. Mm-hmm. And I think that data, I think it's a principle that you need to have high expectations is data. How many kids are we actually sending to trade school? How many kids are we sending to college? How many kids are we actually graduating? And so when you don't have that free flowing of information, then how do you know what high expectation is? So I think not just at our secondary level, not just at our primary level, but I think that needs to go all the way up to the stream, to go to community college level and find out how many students at the community college level are we actually completing those 2-year programs? How many are actually just doing it for personal development? How many are actually continuing to go to a 4-year university? And I think so that means in terms of high expectation, that cultural shift needs to go not just from the secondary level, primary level, but it needs to transition to higher ed, into those 2 years and 4-year universities. And what I've found personally working in the Valley is, I think they work in silos like everything else is, you know? CSUN does not know what's going on with the local high schools, and Mission, Pearson Valley also doesn't know what's going on with everyone else's. And nobody's talking with regards to everyone else's. And I think I want to emphasize this because it's very, very important, is the community collaboration part. That you need to collaborate with other entities from every level, from the university, community college, high school, middle school. Nobody knows, nobody's talking to each other, and they're just doing their own thing, and it's always reinventing the wheel, and it's not enough of just let me share best practices and know what works. So I think for me that would be a thing that I need to make sure that I get across the table is a key principle is the collaboration part and making sure that we don't work in silos.
Right. And we hope we would get your assistance in helping us put together that piece. Marvin Martinez is the Vice Chancellor responsible for economic and workforce development for the Community College District. So our workforce situation is your fault.
Yes. Thank you. And I apologize for being a little bit late here today, obviously.
I should explain that the Community College District, a lot of people don't know, but the Community College District is the largest recipient of dollars from the state of California for workforce development. I know that because I was on the board. Right. So, Marvin, we are talking about how to impact poverty, and one of the principles that emerged is the principle of doing a better job of assessing our future workforce needs. And I think that's something that you can help address.
Okay. Well, what I was prepared to do today is I was going to focus on some of the programs that we now have that we believe are really model programs in terms of working with students who are from low-income backgrounds, disadvantaged adults, as well as disadvantaged youth. One of the challenges that we have is that we know that out of LA Unified School District, that only about anywhere from 20 to 30 students are actually going to a college. Not just like talking about a community college, but we're talking about
say that again?
About anywhere from 20 to 30 students out of every 100.
Oh, okay.
Out of every 100. Anywhere from 20 to 30 students are going to a community college or a Cal State or UC. The question is, what are we doing about the other 70? You know, and what programs do we have in place in order to address the other 70? What programs do we have in place in order to outreach to those 70 to let them know that we exist?
Let me ask you something.
Uh-huh.
Before you
Sure.
go too far down that path,
Yeah.
we have a maximum capacity at every level of our college institutions. I believe that maximum capacity is about 30%. So if our students are maximizing that opportunity, we can't just go to them. At some point, we've got to increase the capacity.
Right.
And
that's an excellent point.
Otherwise, we'll be making promises to people, encouraging them to go to college when they don't fit.
Right. And that's an excellent point. And obviously, that's one of the big issues. Obviously, we're facing right now, where all the colleges are at max. They've reached their growth. Any additional classes they offer now are unfunded. There's no dollars that we're receiving. However, we also have the ability to acquire grants. We have the ability to do contract education, and we have several grants. I don't know if you're aware that the LA Community College District has over $100 million worth in terms of grants that we receive at the federal level and state level, and some local grants. Those grants are very specific. Most of them are workforce training grants, and most of them are specifically designed for us to develop customized training courses that could prepare students for a job. Mm-hmm. So just to be specific, what I mean by that is, about a year ago, the city of LA gave us a grant in order to prepare disadvantaged adults to work for the public utilities. If you recall, it wasn't too long ago that the public utilities came out. There was a headline, remember, I think it was the Daily News, stated that they needed 1,000 new people to work because they have an aging workforce. So we received the grant. We began to develop a curriculum with DWP, and I think SEMPRA was also part of that. We identified cohorts of students. This was short-term training program. So students, we're talking about a semester-long program. So for a semester, they came to classes 5 days a week from basically 9 to 5. At the end of the 17 weeks, they basically had a job waiting for them. As a result, our retention rates were the highest out of most programs on a campus. And so we've already graduated about 7 cohorts of about 30 students each. So now we're looking to upscale that in order to increase it, because we know that the need is great out there, not just for DWP, but for SEMPRA and Southern California Edison. And these are good jobs, good paying jobs, union jobs. So that model is working. The model of short-term training, there's a job waiting at the end, and then focusing on what are the disadvantaged youth and adults. Just this summer.
What did you say? Short-term, quality, accessibility.
High quality, low cost, accessible.
Right. And actually, we just started a program with the city, another program I want to tell you about I thought was really exciting. The MTA approached us where they wanted to see how we can train students to be public transit operators. They needed more bus drivers. So they came to us, and we've developed a program, 4 weeks long. So for a 4-week program, students come in. After they complete the 4 weeks, they start working as public transit operators. And so this program that has been going on for several months now. So we know that's a formula that works, because if you're going to target disadvantaged adults or youth, it's hard to tell anybody, by the way, it's going to take you 2 years to get a degree. They can't wait that long to be without a paycheck. So we know that the way we want to be able to develop programs is one where there's a job also waiting at the end. This summer, we started something unique with young people. This program is called LA Scholars. It was part of the Summer Youth initiative that started this summer. We developed a program based upon a teacher career pathway where students would come in, high school graduates, or even they weren't graduates, but they were at-risk youth, and they were taking classes at 8 of our 9 colleges, by the way. And along with taking the class, they also had an after-school job. So they would go to class from 8 to about 1 o'clock. Then in the afternoon, they would have an after-school job. And when we announced this program, I remember when we publicized it, we had so many students come to us. And we felt the driving force was not so much the courses that were going to be taken, but there was a job. They were happy to go to class, and they were happy to have a job, but also to have a job that was related to what they're studying. So this program now has been expanded. We started with initial seed dollars from the city. The Packard Foundation now has approached us and said, look, we're happy to fund you for the next 5 years so you can have this program year-round at all 9 colleges. So we know it's a formula that works. It's a formula that again provides students an opportunity for some level of employment.
The general principle I'm hearing is identical to what Ed presented.
Mm-hmm.
That is that we need to develop programs that enable people to transition into higher success opportunities and not lose their pay, their ability to earn money.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, that's where the short-term quality, low cost, because a lot of people who would otherwise be able to gain higher skills won't do it because they don't have the time or resources to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the principle is we have to develop more programs that are targeted logistically
Right.
at industries that where we know we need, where we have plenty of jobs out there.
Right.
Trucking, nursing, and
And just one more thing.
But the point is that in order for them to penetrate through and complete the program, they have to have an ability to earn money, and we have to design more programs like that.
Right. So the job, in essence, becomes a retention instrument. It becomes an opportunity for the student to feel, you know what, I want to go to those classes. I want to graduate. I want to complete my certificate. Second point I just wanted to make is that, what we do in education, we do boutique programs well.
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean by boutique programs is
I know what you
like,
mean.
you know what I mean. We have to get out of that paradigm. We have to upscale. It's all about upscaling here in LA, as you know, as a council member Alarcon. So
They have to be systematic.
exactly, systematic. So
Yeah, and in fact, I didn't say it, but so many people in traditional public education fall into this trap of saying, well, we have this program over here that does this, and we have this program over here that does this, but the programs aren't everywhere,
Mhm.
and so people can't take advantage of them, and it really doesn't have an impact on the system as a whole. It just, over here it worked, but we haven't figured out how to get it all. It's sort of like the charter school movement,
Mhm.
where a charter school, I know one experience I had in the first charter school, which I served on the commission for, they had a certain amount of success, but it was driven by a $500,000 grant from an outside institution. Well, any school that had $500,000 in additional resources, any elementary school, would do better.
Mhm.
It goes without saying. So it wasn't so much the system of charter school, it was the resources, the per capita spending went up. And so so I appreciate that. I do want to make mention of something I know that you are doing and very much engaged in, and I do believe is part of the equation answer to your question, as well as the issue of community access. And that is that you are devising a specific effort to get more local communities. I worked on a many-year effort, I believe it was 10 years, to get Mission College open in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. The primary reason that it wouldn't open was because the administration, all the way up to the state, refused to believe that people would go to college in the Northeast Valley. And as you know, Mission College has been a tremendous success in terms of its attractiveness to the student population. Essentially, if you build it, they will come. And so, Marvin, you are now taking that to an initiative to create satellites for the existing community college system. And I know that you are targeting, for example, in my district, Panorama City, but you could say this anywhere. You're targeting Sunland as well in Wendy Gruhl's district. And so it would address your concern about access. It's not that they don't want to go to college, but it's
Too far away.
it's $20 or $30 a week in gas to go, where in Panorama City you have access to thousands of people who could probably walk there.
Absolutely.
And so if you could talk
Yeah.
a little bit about
Sure.
that.
And, and this is all thanks to the voters of LA for supporting the bond. There was a bond called Measure J that we took to the voters on the ballot for November 4th, and they supported it. It was a $3.5 billion bond. And as you were saying, Councilmember Alarcon, that a big component of that was the satellite campuses. It's a new concept to community colleges because, as you know, for our bonds, what we've done in the past is develop the campus. And it's great to develop the science building and a new anthropology building and so forth. But we needed to take it a step further. How do we take education to the people? And one way to do that was to develop a satellite campus. So Panorama City is one. So we're looking at a campus there'll be at least 100,000 square feet. It keeps growing every day because of the enthusiasm by the campus faculty members who now are seeing that, we need to be out there. We need to be able to develop our classes out there. And so we're getting, the more faculty you get, then the more that this facility is increasing. We're developing a campus over at LAX. And that they'll be part of Councilmember Rosenthal's area, and it will focus on three major areas: tourism, hospitality, as well as the homeland security issues.
Fantastic.
And as you know, there's a big group of individuals who live in Lenox and all those areas, a lot of poor people, a lot of disadvantaged adults, a lot of immigrant populations out there. Another campus we're developing is in the city of Southgate. It's around a corner of Alameda and Firestone Boulevard. We basically have bought the old tire Firestone factory. 1 million square feet. So what is 1 million square feet equivalent to? Well, East LA College, our biggest campus, is 986,000 square feet. This campus will probably become our 10th campus eventually. Not yet, but it'll be a while. So and if you go to that community, you know that it's very dense. A lot of students who've dropped out, and a lot of disadvantaged adults and so forth. We're also developing a campus over at the Harbor area, the Wilmington area, and over in Councilmember Janice Hahn's area. And this will be also another significant campus that we're going to be developing in that part of town. And there's the first one that we're going to open up will be in it's called the Atwater, the Van de Kamp campus, which is right where the 2 and the 5 meet on San Fernando Road, and that'll be a 90,000 square foot facility. The major thrust of it will be ESL. A good number of our ESL courses will be offered there. A good number of our workforce readiness courses will be offered there. We're also looking to make that into a health career academy. So the satellite concept has taken off really well. I think that most people in the community college community had bought into that. They feel that it's the right thing to do. It is what we should be doing as a community college. Obviously, we're called a community college, so we should be out there in the community. It wasn't that way, as you know, Councilmember, it wasn't that way a year ago. 2 years ago was a hard sell. Faculty members, everybody feels that they should be on the campus, and everyone should come to the campus.
Well, we had an interesting situation in Panorama City,
Right.
where the previous president at Valley College didn't want a satellite campus.
Right.
So we went to Mission College and asked them to sponsor the satellite in Panorama City. The new president at Mission College was excited and willing and offered all her resources to do it. But they got a new president at Valley who said, "Stay out of my turf. That's my turf. I want the satellite office." That kind of competition is great. But the point is that that we are that falls under the principle of localizing our schools, not just elementary schools, because when I grew up, and I'm sure this is a common experience amongst minorities, but when I grew up, college was not a reality. It was not something that I would envision ever participating in. In fact, up until the 11th grade, I anticipated joining the Marines and going to Vietnam, and that was the extent of my goal setting. And fortunately, I was intervened by an LAUSD teacher in the 11th grade who told me I could go to college. But Cal State Northridge, even though it's only, I think it's about 8 miles from my home, where I lived, was not a reality in my life. Northridge and Sun Valley were two very distinct locations. College was not a reality in Sun Valley, and so we need to create localized campuses. That was the notion of Mission College. That's the notion of Panorama City, Sunland, Harbor. Although you have Harbor College, I'm sure there's an area that
Right, you have Wilmington right next door, right?
Wilmington is an area of need. One way to end poverty is to provide education to those who wouldn't otherwise have it. And this is the adult education system, I think, is the most underrated and underfunded government service that could have more benefit per dollar than many other things that we fund. And in many ways, you are not given the respect that you should. So I appreciate your efforts. I hope you will help us write this document. And adult education is so important because so many people who are in our country did not have opportunities to get the kind of education that they can get in adult education here, wherever they came from. And so we, I believe it is one of the solutions to grow our. In fact, I don't know the number. I think it's like. Is it 5 times as many people go to community college as 4-year universities?
Oh yeah, it's over 1 million people.
1 million versus
versus
a couple 100,000 or something.
Yeah, like 300,000 for the Cal States,
so
and UC's a lot smaller.
Far more people go to community colleges, and that doesn't even count the adult secondary level,
which is huge.
And we need to invest in that level so that people can make those shifts necessary. I'll just tell you one experience. There's a young man that we're trying to help out, and we got him into real estate school, so he got his real estate license. Then the market took a dive, so then he went into he got his Class A license. He's struggling to find a place because they want experience. We need on-the-job training, and we don't have enough of it. But there was one other career that he got an actual license for, but he had all these things, and things were falling off the edge. So we need to be able to anticipate where the things are going to be most productive. We don't have time to cover all the issues. What I try to do at these hearings is to engage you so that once we've got you engaged, we can use you as we're writing the document. When we write these sections, we want to ask you if you would review them and contribute to them and criticize them and get them politely, please, and then get them back to us because as any elected official knows, our dreams are much broader than our actual capabilities, and we know that you would like to see so much more of the systems that you work within, but are challenged by resources and a variety of other things. But nevertheless, if we're creating a long-term plan to end poverty, we can dream. And many times those dreams become a reality. So we would ask that if you would help us with those documents. So I want to thank you for allowing us to have this conversation. We will stay in touch. We're going to have another hearing to engage LA Unified once they get their contractual. Well, excuse me, not. I'm sorry. The K through 12 system in LA Unified to participate and. Obviously, today they have their hands full with other items that may prove more sexy to the public, I guess. Okay, with that, I want to adjourn this meeting. But again, thank you so much for participating.
Thank you.
We think you have a lot of the answers to the issues of poverty, and it's just a question of us being able to implement them. So thank you.
Thank you.
And stuff like that. I don't know.
Where was it?
El Camino. I think it was required in 12th grade to take economics, right?
Yeah.
Economics?
I think it was
No.
called economics. Yeah.
No, economics is not required, but there is a requirement. It can substitute for.
Oh,
It's